Hi, friends. Thanks for being patient while we had more friends joining in. A big welcome to everyone. Good evening. Welcome to all our friends who've joined. It's actually been a couple of months since Reframe has had an event in this online space, and we're really, really happy to be back. Today is a very special day, and happy to see some old friends here. Delighted to see some new names here. So I think given that there's a mix of the old and the new, I'm going to do, I think brief introductions are in order. So first for myself. Hi, I'm Vani Subramanian. I'm a Delhi-based documentary filmmaker and part of a team that came together just over 2 years ago to start this initiative called Reframe. One of the primary things we do at Reframe is run an arts fellowship program, which has seen the production of over 20 works by our fellows in the last 2 years. Called Generalities. It's helped our artists create films, mixed media projects, graphic novels, performative pieces, podcasts, all kinds of things that speak across gender, ethnic, religious identities, geographies, sexualities, perspectives, and experiences of and around gender. Another thing we do at Reframe, not as often as we would like to, is what we call small talk, a series of conversations in which artists indulge in some not so choti moti baatein about what they do. They are free-flowing discussions that meander and reflect on creative approaches, on thoughts while creating, on questions, on challenges, on concerns that cross mediums and forms and materialities. Today is another one in that series. And in today's episode of Small Talk, we seek to expand the conversation a little bit. We will reflect on the imperatives that drive us to make political art. But we will also look at the question of the moment in which it is made, as well as the significance of the point from which we look back of what was created. We'll also talk about what are the urgencies of the present that drive us to collate and share things from the past, and how our critical lens on such collections are ways for each of us to think about what futures we are working towards through our practice, whatever that may be. In that sense, an archive is not a simple idea. It's much more than a collection of memories banked for nostalgic reasons or just a recording of some golden era, which we are all adequately cynical about. Archives exist because they present as evidence things we cannot interrogate in their absence. They come into being not because the past is sorted, neatly organized, understood, or even articulated. In that sense, they have meaning because they tell us much of what was, but they also lead us to think about what isn't, in the gaps in the information, in the silences between the words. But I'm sure our conversation today and our speakers are going to tease a lot more out of the idea of the archives and why they are relevant, especially in political times like today. We're very proud that today's event marks the launch of the Majlis Culture Centre digital archives. It's a very special moment for us. As most of us know, the Majlis Culture Centre was an art initiative that worked from the 90s to 2016 in Bombay. In its time, many artists, filmmakers, architects, social scientists were all involved and collaborating in its work and vision in various capacities. I'm hoping, I haven't had time to look at who's here with us today, but I'm hoping, fair amount of them are here with us today or will catch this later on Facebook or on YouTube. Presenting and sharing the archives with us will be Madhusree Dutta. She's a filmmaker, a curator, and author who prefers to call herself a cultural producer. She was the executive director of the Majlis Culture Centre from 1990 to 2016, and the artistic director of the Academy of Arts of the World in Cologne, Germany, from 2018 to 2021. She has, initiated several other public art projects and archive projects within both the organizations she's worked in, as well as beyond that. And quickly, now I'm going to vanish soon. But before I do that, I want to say just two things. One, today's conversation will not be complete without you. We want, so please feel free to populate the chat with whatever you want to say, thoughts, comments, questions, ideas, emojis, everything is welcome, right? But you'll also have a chance in our Q&A to directly speak to the speaker you want to, or to directly raise issues. So don't go away. The other thing is, of course, that this event is being streamed live on Facebook. So, and I think the link is on the chat box. So if you want to share it with friends, please do. Madhusree, I'm going to hand this over now to you.
Thanks, Vani, for such a warm and also demanding introduction. I feel like dodging it, and I'll do exactly that. I'm sharing my screen.
Hello, I'm Sudhir Patwardhan. I was fortunate to be associated with many of Majlis's projects. It was great fun and a chance to collaborate with others. Painting local train bogies in a railway yard, for example, was a memorable experience. Also, the Cinema City exhibition and the calendar project. Majlis meant innovative engagement. Majlis was a truly broad-based coming together of like-minded people of the left. And this at a time when our common beliefs were being put to a test by the changes around us. The period that Majlis was active in, 1990 to 2016, spans a critical period for both the city of Mumbai and for the nation. Majlis created opportunities to respond to the changing times in new ways. And it did this across a wide range of social action, public arts projects, individual works of art, plays, and of course film. Many artists created important independent works through its fellowships. Tushar Jok, Pushpamala, Archana Hande, to name just a few. And Jayant Pawar's Adhantar has become a classic in Marathi theatre. It is great that indomitable Madhusree has put together this archive of Majlis's activities. It is an important record of the many ways in which a city was creatively responding to and resisting an increasingly conflicted and brutal period. The archive enshrines the spirit of resistance and hope. Thank you.
Thank you, Sudhir. I hope you are here. This is, look, why I did this, why I started with Sudhir is that wanted to place this whole endeavor in a particular time and space. Because we think that more concentratedly we put such an endeavor, such an action in a time and space, then more relevant it will become to another space and another time. So it's very important that temporality is placed, and who better than Sudhir Patwardhan to put the organization, the initiative squarely in the history of Bombay. I feel very blessed with this. But another reason is that if it was a live program, then there would have been more people. Somebody showed one section, somebody introduced another section, somebody talk nostalgic about another project. But because it is online, we don't have that kind of expanse of a whole day program online. So it's only me, and I don't want it to at the end become a lonely program. It was supposedly a prototype for collective art productions. So I'm trying to drag people in various other ways into it. So about the archive. Some people asked us, very rightly so, that is it a website or an archive? Somewhere we say website, somewhere we say archive. So like about everything else in life, we are being a bit hybrid here too. Format-wise or as a platform, this is a website. But websites are living entity. They need to be attended to, tended and expanded very regularly. These days, almost every hour. We shall not be able to do that in this case. And the reasons are various, but I shall only mention the most important and the conceptual one. We are taking this opportunity to create a resource. And this is a resource. Recirculating certain moments of action from the past in order to put them in the service of the present. So basically to realize the potential of the past. Otherwise, we are not interested in the past, but we thought that there's some potential in our own legacies, in our own heritage that we created, not national heritage, not community heritage, but it's a collective heritage that we created, which has some, that can provide some sustenance to us. Now, the present situation, severe that it is in many more ways than one, has made us feel that we need to look in also. I mean, we of course need to look out, but we need to look in also that what we already built, that something can be taken out of it and make use of. And for that, I'm putting Githa Hariharan, who is my co-panelist here. We must make common memories. We must make memories today, and that has to be common. And then employ those memories into near action planning. So it is not a simple act of what were there, but towards what more can be done and must be done. Sometimes it is important to seize an action in order to begin a newer, a more robust, a more clever one. This is one such point. Hence, this is an archive. So it's a website and also it's an archive. It is because it is an end by itself, a reservoir to dig into and make something else. With that, I will share my screen again and take you to the site. This is the homepage, and this homepage has a very simple URL, not difficult to remember, majlisculture.in. And it has these maps of Bombay through the decades as the city is expanding. This is to locate. This is, it is in the first image in the home page. This is an attempt to locate the center in a particular place at a particular time, and the temporality that we talked about, that Sudhir has talked about. And it is 1990s. The beginning is 1990s. Again, I'm quoting Sudhir saying that that is the time that when our faith, our common faith in nation making was challenged for the first time in the recent history. I mean, not that it's the first time ever, but in recent history. And that early 90s, that is the time this initiative started. And this initiative was not new. There are similar initiatives in other parts of the country. Namely, one name just come to my mind immediately is Sahmat in Delhi. So this was the moment. Moment is the word reFrame has decided to, as a tagline for today's event, making and moment. So this was the moment, 1990. And 1992, December, the major turning point in our public life, in a way consolidated, which was a loose initiative into an organization. We thought that we need to consolidate ourselves. And hence the name was Majlis, a pan-Asian word for collective, jalsa, gathering, public place, meeting. We wanted to secularize this word and put it into circulation. Though in 1990s, it came under heated debate also from our comrades and peer group. We were not used to these strategies at that time. So now let's go back to the home page. There are 5 folders, studio productions. Studio productions actually talks about the individual works, films, plays, publications, which are authored, which is a particular film associated with filmmaker, theater director, authors. They are not necessarily collective or anonymous or public place culture. This reflects actually our minute negotiation with the forms of art making and issues of representation and dissemination. So it's very, that's why we call it studio, because it was a concentrated work on production. So that's making, which is the second keyword that reFrame used to say that art making moment. So this is the moment, and that this was about the making. Here I would again go to this section called Then at the Rate of Now, from where you have heard Sudhir Pattabardhan. So there are a few people from different positions and with different practices. We requested to talk about what Majlis means today. One of them is Vani Subramanian, today's host. Vani, I'm sorry that I'm throwing it on you. I know you will be angry with me, but let it be.
Hi, I'm Vani Subramanian. I'm a Delhi-based documentary filmmaker and feminist activist, and I'm going to say a few words about the Majlis Culture Centre. I think it's impossible if you are my generation, maybe even one before, and certainly some after, if you're the kind of person who believes in political art, thinks about it, creates it, irrespective of your medium, it's tough, if not impossible, for you to not know about the Majlis Culture Centre that ran in Bombay in its time. But before I begin, disclosure I think is in order. While in its time the centre collaborated with scores of artists and thinkers and social scientists and archivists and so on, I was never formally associated with the projects or programs of Majlis. So this is an opinion that really comes from the outside of those years, and certainly what it meant to me as I was coming into my own during those years. But as I look back at Majlis and I think about it and I reflect on its role, its work, why I really appreciated some of the work that happened, and in a way I guess I also admired it, I don't want to have this conversation with sort of the kind of gravitas that it can have. So I'm going to structure what I have to say through a few politically incorrect words. And the first one I'm going to start with is ambitious. Ambitious in a market-driven world implies a ruthless competitive spirit. But I actually often find myself thinking about it in the context of Majlis. Because I think that as a place, it dared to think big, dream big, and do big. So, that involved artistic productions that took on daunting political challenges, large projects that drew folks from across disciplines and interests, collaborations that provoked fresh ideas, and public events that actually challenged the public discourse. Which gets me to my second one, playful. If the work of the centre, both what it supported and helped produce and made itself, if some of that work could rage and challenge, disturb and disrupt, and compel introspection, some of it could also be playful. It could tease you with lightness, with irony, with irreverence, about the past as much as the present. And given that in the world of art and culture and politics, lightness can be very challenging, did they quake from going there? Not really, I think. And here's the last one before I go. Best before. One-time use, expiry dates, built-in obsolescence. These are the markers of our times that tell us when things turn to waste. Everything. Food, fashion, technology, shampoos, language, everything, you name it. But as we hurtle past it all, if we shift focus a bit to the side and rearview mirrors, I think we will see a flash of inspiration that still glimmers, an idea that still stands, a glimpse of work that still speaks to us, still makes a difference. In times like the present, which are so politically challenging, this archive of the Majlis Culture Centre then becomes a place to revisit ideas, to debate, discuss, and of course, differ with them too. To understand the compassion and rigor that it takes to support artists and their vision, even if it is to think and rethink them. To challenge our minds and open new conversations on the shoulders of the old. To draw from this source of history as a source of energy that helps set all of us free, individually and collectively, to be more ambitious, to be more playful, to be better than before, or should I say bestest than before. Thanks.
Thank you, Vani. Okay, so you have made us old and you have made us shoulders. Not soldiers anymore, but shoulders. Okay, never mind. So now, I mean, these are, you can also explore it in your when you have time. But I just want to show something like, say, films, which was the mainstay of Majlis. It has actually produced something like 36 films in its lifetime. But here is one thing I want to show you as a design. Let's go to non-fiction features, which was actually our mainstay. Now here, I mean, we have some large number of films, and these are photos. But generally what happened in a website is that, okay, you click, I want to see Seema Biswas, or I want to see such and such, still from such and such film because it is useful. And we didn't want to do that. We didn't want to become a pocket size provider. You need to look for it. You need to engage. Here, say, these are like all, it's like a box of photos. So we are trying to actually imitate or insinuate various analogous practices, analogous archive, where you go, you feel the dust, you get the stain, and you go breathless and get dust allergy and whatever, to look for something. It's not that severe, but still we try to create that experience. So you'll have to go through it to find, like, they are not related to each other. It goes to one film, another size, another format. We try to mix it. And here I want to acknowledge the person with whom practically I worked every day for the last 6 months is Pramothesh Pai, our programmer, designer. A painfully shy guy, refused to come online. Otherwise, anyway, he deserves a clap. I mean, we would have given him a clap if it was on-site event. Thanks, Prathamesh. This is officially, I told you thank you many times, but this is officially on behalf of all of us. It's wonderful because while talking about it, we used to talk about that we don't want to become easy thing, that you don't have to do research. You can just do Google. It is only, knowledge is only a matter of few keywords and you can get it. But at the same time, we want to accessible. So basically, you want to make it accessible, digitally accessible, free downloadable. Everything here is the free downloadable, but not Googleable. By Google, I'm talking about an attitude. So one such little design resistance is this. There are a few other things, but I'm just mentioning this to give you an idea. Okay, and I think I should go to the next point. This is about studio production. Then the next thing is archive project. Now, archive project, these projects are not about producing. It's just opposite of producing it or making. They are about collating, incubating, preserving, healing, repairing, and circulating. That which is public but not accessible, public culture. And which is anonymous culture sometimes. I mean, you don't know the author's name, you don't know the people, or sometimes you, even if you know, you should not circulate it. So there are various other consideration, not production consideration, that needs to be kept in mind. That was archive project. So archive project has three distinct: urban culture, which Majlis was quite known for. It's mainly about Bombay's various kinds of urban culture. Altogether, something like 130 files are uploaded through Padma. So your pad.me, I'm sure you all know of that project. So you can access them there. They are also a free access project. But the second one is about television news 2003 Iraq invasion. Now, this is 2003 when US invaded Iraq. And if you remember, there's the first time the term which came to circulation was embedded journalist. So these are the images that embedded journalists were showing us every day, and for weeks together we watched them. all over the world through BBC and CNN, and they basically is the same image. The dates are changing, weeks are changing, but it is the same image. And you know what these images are? These images are that time, it was quite new technology, a night vision enabled camera fixed to the night vision enabled army tank, which was invading various Iraqi towns only at the dead of the night when people were sleeping. And so people were sleeping and they were getting invaded by US Army tank, but we all over the world could see it through this night vision enabled cameras. So the settlements are blurred and become homogenized, but they're people settlement and they got destroyed. And so these created a kind of ethics, television ethics, news ethics, and war aesthetics. This is a very crucial time. Then it got repeated on a much larger scale later on in later decades. By even now, as you know, we are in the middle of many wars in the world. But we thought that this was a very important moment. So we actually made a small archive of television news footage on this. But today, as archiving practice can also be about, where am I? I'm myself getting... Okay, it can also be about obscuring, about hiding, about protecting, about veiling, about making palimpsest. It's not always collecting and making it accessible, making it known. Sometimes not making it known is also a responsibility. And it's very difficult to say when towards that we end up doing self-censorship. So this is a page on Kashmir, public image culture in 1990s. That is when digital technology reached the valley, local production of images started happening. Before that, it was analogous, it was expensive, and it was always the vision from outside, beautiful Kashmir or poor Kashmir or whatever is from the outside view, Bollywood. So this is the first time there was self-portrayal, because digital technology made it possible. So in 1990s, because that time I was a full-fledged filmmaker, we realized that the number of videos and photographs that are coming from Kashmir was overwhelmingly more than even Bombay, which is supposed to be the media city. So we collected apparently quite innocent public place images of that for various reasons. You know why it is this, why they are not here in this site and why the site looks like this. I just wanted to tell you, this is another way. So it is not only collect and then at one point make it accessible, but every time you do this, you actually need to think through it again politically and then with political artistic way, okay? Next is Solidarity Initiative. Solidarity Initiative is actually peer support where we shared our skill, resources, contact network with other people. Fellowship project, which was with the peer artists, with the artists who are our friends, our collaborators, to give support to them, production support. Then there was annual course, which was with the undergraduate student, a kind of appraisal course that we used to run for a week for many years. Which was quite popular. Many of them are now very well-known artists, and they talk about these courses because we used to call them jokingly, it's not an orientation course, it's a disorientation course. So disorient yourself. And video literacy project was for the community youth, mainly about a Muslim majority settlement in Jogeshwari after the riots, and the youngsters from the families of retrenched workers from the textile industries in Girangaon, that is the textile mill areas. So video literacy for them. So this is the Solidarity project. So fifth thing is public art festivals. That is what Majlis is most known for, because it's the most, what should I say, robust and most public events. These are large-scale events, and I remember that time people used to say it is more in the style of youth festival of the socialist era. So people used to jokingly say, "Oh, Majlis is the last of the Soviet era." So it was at that scale, and actually we studied youth festivals a lot to think through the scale and the density and the outreach and all this. Of course, not without any controversy over that. And in a city like Bombay, public as people and public as space are always contentious, dense, and very fragile also. So there are two bookends to that. One is Expression 1990, which was actually the beginning of Majlis. The Expression did not happen under the name of Majlis. Majlis came out of this feminist art festival. In those days, you need to be really, what Vani says, irreverential to call yourself feminist artist or do a festival on feminist art. Today it is like too cliche, but yeah, 30 years back it was difficult. I hope some of the people who were present in Expression are present here today. But this is the moment. I also remember the stalwarts who came for these festivals and gave it a kind of endorsement, which was very important to start Majlis. And I want to mention some of them because they are not here with us today. They're gone. Chandralekha, Usha Ganguly, Veena Pani Chawla, Pushpa Bhave, Vidya Bal, Yashodhara Bakshi, Sonal Shukla, I may be missing some names, and much later who came as collaborators to, and we did many works together, is Tushar Jog and Arghya Basu. I'm sorry, this may not be the space, but I wanted a public space to acknowledge these people and to tell them we're missing you. Okay, and then of course, World Social Forum, which was, I call it the last of the mega romance in our life, 2004 to 2007. This was about belonging to a larger world of ideology and political practice. This project was also about artists squatting the political space. Artists squatting the political space. Political space was not engaging artists. This very important distinction, I want to mention it here. And the number of international artists ran in more than 3,000. I mean, I'm not making a Bollywood convention of number counting, but it's important to know this because it was a self-organized event. And the project that Majlis is most known about, because it's the recent project and a very robust project, is Project Cinema City. That's the last thing I'm talking about. Project Cinema City is so big that it deserved another site. So if the site is, I'm going to that site. It's again, it's very easy to remember. The URL is projectcinemacity.in. This is the homepage. Now, cinema and city, these are the two key words. Extremely outgoing, loud, and dense entities. Everybody knows about them. They are public and they're popular. They are also immediate and very jaded. Over talked about, over represented. So new forms were required to break the hypnosis of familiarity and conventions. We did that in the project, but we felt that again we need to do that when we are making this archive, because what was that time during the project was breaking convention has already become very jaded convention, so we had to do it again. So this is the home page. Each page has an introductory piece of moving image, because this is also our engagement with moving image. So moving image beyond cinema, moving image beyond film. So we try to explain various ways of pre-cinema moving image and post-cinema moving image. And every page or every segment has a header like this. I mean, there is a text also, but we also try to create a visual text as an introduction to the theme. Okay, so And this is a home page, and then there are 3 conceptual pages where we talk about the concept. How is Cinema City? I mean, is Cinema City well, or how do you make a Cinema City? Is Cinema City an entity? Research, art, and documentary, and archiving the contemporary. These are the 3 key concepts that run through the project. I'll not get into it. You may have a look at it. And these vertical tabs are the works that are produced. Large, some of you may know that huge amount of volume of work is produced, but something I'm very pleased about, and I want to share it with you, that is the screen works. Many films were produced for television, but for other use also, and video art. But the introduction of this is looking like this. Which is pre-cinema moving image concept, as and Benjamin actually talks a lot about this phase just before cinema, which is actually speculating on cinema. So try to create that moment. We means Prathamesh mainly. Prathamesh. Okay. Then there is, so all the films are then listed and given link to. Installation work, so these are collaboration between disciplines. So cartographers or architects collaborated with visual artists collaborated with filmmakers collaborated with somebody else, and finally a work came up. Those are called collaborative work. But what I want to show, and then calendar projects, Sudhir also mentioned it, 65 calendars for the 20th century were produced. But interesting was the exhibition from 2010 to 2012. We held many exhibitions across the country and also abroad. And there, the question was, how does one exhibit, display, disseminate a research art project on popular culture? The reply was, by making it conducive to foyers, corridors, classrooms, streets, and then by invading the museums. So these are the various exhibitions, but I'm just trying to reach to a particular point. So I'll very quickly go through it. I mean, they, as you can see that this is chronologically done. So it's growing by the volume. Every time it goes to the public place, something gets added. And then it goes to the next exhibition. Then, so it's getting more and more thicker. It's getting thicker and more robust, more dense also. But I want to show you when finally our dream came true, when we actually could put a part of the exhibition in Kalagora Square. A dream that we, and I want to show you some photos. This is the bioscope Kaushik Mukhopadhyay plan, but this is my favorite photo. I'm showing you the exhibition section for this photo. This guy was put to do surveillance on us, but he got so hooked to it. Inside the bioscope, we are running a timeline of the public culture of Bombay, which was actually very political. And we also translated in Marathi, and it was running in Marathi. He got completely, he spent hours standing there, asked so many questions, and yeah, this is my favorite photo. This is about the pipeline network of cinema, how cinema establishments are networked like a pipeline, done by Rohan Shivkumar and Apurva Parikh. Okay, that's it. How do I get out of it? Okay. Yeah. So there are graphic works, which are maps, because you also work with architects, Architecture College, KRVIA. So there we produce lots of maps, imaginary maps and real maps and maps by the scale. But my last, and then to public is which have given back to the public, which you have given back to the public in terms of merchandise, like goodies that you take home, or the calendars, or a pedagogical course that we ran, and also dialogues across various sectors of people. So this is the image we created for the to the publics, because it's a public culture. Finally, it must go back to the public. Some of the calendars without the author's name are actually printed and put back in the Chor Bazaar with the hope that after 20 years, it will be considered as original. But my last one is these print works, which are actually about published works, about the books. But this is the interactive model. Dodia Shatterwala. This is a map of a lane where at the end of the lane is a single screen cinema. You know those neighborhood cinemas, the Roxys and the metros and the plazas and the novelties and Bahar and Chandan in every cities in India, which was very popular. And the lanes were as lively or more lively. People used to hang around there. This used to be heart of the city, nerve center of this of the neighborhood. New love used to happen there. You would learn to smoke cigarette there. Maybe first beer also happened in that lane. So it's about growing up. Now cinemas in single screen cinema has come to an end, but this street culture has survived celluloid also. So Dodia's Shatterwala is one. Contact here for painting religious, political and material idols on your shop shutters. So people who belong to the visual art world know what we mean by it. This one is for dead body duplicate, for collecting donation at the signal for the funeral. This one is Rohindan Mistry plagiarized the Palam Tor Panwala character from the opium khor storyteller who comes here every night at 9/11. Pochutai sweeps the theater at dawn and leaves before the audience rush in. A devotee of open air Padda cinema, Ganapati special, she finds it scandalous to watch film indoor. Okay, and my favorite one is Chinese dentist closed since the Indo-China War of 1962. As the dentist who spoke only Marathi, could not cooperate with the raw chief who was from North India and got thrown into the Arabian Sea. So these are the local story or local history or oral stories, urban stories. That's it. So with the Chinese dentist, I end here. Over to you, Vani.
Thank you, Madhu, for that. You know, it was a lovely brief sort of guided tour, but I know that there's a lot more to actually discover in the site, you know, as it complicates its own history, it complicates the information that's there, the images that are there, the ideas with which you all worked. So without wasting any more time, I'm going to ask for this conversation to open a little more and invite Githa Hariharan to come in. I think most of us know the inimitable Githa. Author and co-founder of the Indian Writers Forum, a platform for cultural politics, and currently consulting editor to the forum's Journal of Culture called Guftgu. Githa has, of course, also written many novels, short fiction, and essays over the last 3 decades. Her highly acclaimed work includes novels such as the award-winning The Thousand Faces of Night and the more recent I Have Become the Tide. She's been visiting professor or writer in residence in several universities in the US, the UK, Singapore, Goa, and Jamia Millia Islamia in Delhi. Githa, look forward to hearing more from you, your reading of the ideas that are out there on the Majlis site, and the larger question of how do you remember, how do you write, how do you collate history, how do we revisit it? Over to you, Githa.
Thank you, Vani. I have to begin with congratulating every single person associated with the Majlis Cultural Centre. over the years when it was alive, and now that it is been born again. So that is one thing I want to start with. And I also want to thank reFrame for giving us this opportunity to use a specific archive, a specific cultural center to talk about various issues of concern. And there's been some talk of moments. So what I really want to do is take the Majlis moment and take the present moment. There's really no point talking, I think, about writing or making art or making film or anything without talking about the present moment. Because obviously we are doing all this, we are making in response to the present moment. We're not making in a vacuum. So making art, or should I say arts, whether overtly political or covertly political, also we have to remember that, because sometimes the word political can be very confusing, especially in times when we're constantly told, in India at least, don't politicize the matter. Well, the matter is going to be hollow if you don't politicize it, of course. So I want to make some comments linked actually, though they might seem fragmentary, about this archive, about this resource, because I want to link making and the Majlis moment with the present moment, because the second part of making is sharing. You know, it's all very well to make, but unless it's shared with as many people as possible, it's fairly pointless. So to address the significance of the digital archive of the Majlis Culture Centre, we need to reframe the word for the evening. We need to reframe what it was trying to do over 25 years and what we, you and I, can do with it now. So the first point I want to make is that just as Majlis names a collective space and effort, the archive, the resources will continue to live as long as the collective, the community, works at making art and documentation, political art and documentation, draws on art and film and word and song, which is already there, but builds on it. So this archive too, like any cultural project, is a creature that needs to be probed, fed, retold. When I say probed, of course, I imply that not everything need be sweetness and light. That includes doubt and disagreement and debate. So what we've seen, what Madhu has shown us, a little bit of feel of the resources, it invites modification, because a conversation they were having and the conversation we are now having about how to respond imaginatively, politically, will not end. This is not a conversation that is complete, will ever be complete. So, in other words, continuity. That's the first thing I want to flag. And by continuity, I mean a chain of efforts to name. As a writer, I always think of the entire project as naming either the unnameable or the unnamed or the not so easy to name. So a chain of efforts to name, respond, add, underscore, disagree, undercut. So let me cite a few links in this chain from the Majlis archive. So several of the stage productions in street plays that you can look at over there, documented there. And of course, in a particular moment, in a particular context, as response to a particular set of events or an event, they articulate our questions about how to vault over gender fault lines, There's a very strong aspiration to both document, question, present testimonies, but also guide, say these are the laws, this is here, this is information you could use. So nothing is too banal. So this is a wealth of material. So vaulting over gender fault lines, caste, community, and the obstacles of alleged tradition and alleged morality, all with the purpose of moving closer to an emancipatory path. So, we say political so easily, so glibly, but I want over and over again, to come and underline what might actually fill this hold all called the political. So there are very, very strong there's very strong content there on gender issues, the updates, as I mentioned, on the laws as it affects women, and of course, the material on communalism. It allows us to place those, that when you're watching some of those testimonies or films or whatever, which show the division on the basis of community, you immediately link it with what we are going through now. So if it begins as a response to 1992 and the demolition of Babri Masjid, and quite specifically as response to the riots in Bombay in 1993, immediately you see a rather ghastly chain to the very, very planned and systematic diminishing of the minorities, literally and metaphorically. So I have said the collective is involved in these tasks of keeping the archive, and so the making and remaking of political expression alive. Let's consider what this collective is, what this community is, and perhaps we should say the set of intersecting communities maybe. So the artistic community, I want to remind us, a word of cheer. We needn't be gloomy all the time, but the artistic community is bigger than we think. It is more bewilderingly diverse than we can contain neatly in a gallery or a book or a site. And we do need to remember this again and again. And it's only when you get into the collective, when you get into the archive, when you get into interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary and so forth, what Madhu will know, what we have always called the broad front, that you realize that we do have the numbers. And of course, in India, even small numbers make very large numbers indeed. So the challenge is precisely to keep the numbers large and the people involved and the disciplines wide-ranging, and to mix them all up in eloquent ways. And I think this cultural center has given us one sample of what could be achieved at that point. In short, to speak about this country we live in, the world as well, with its riches and miseries, to try and make sense of the views we see, but from many, many windows. So many, many windows. I've said continuity, now I'm saying multiplicity of people, views, approaches, means, modes, of languages, literal and otherwise. Now, that happens, of course, when there's a focus on popular culture, taking note of languages and dialects. At this point, I want to go back to a recent moment, and I want to go back to this several times, actually two moments, 2015 and 2019. 2015, when after Kalburgi was assassinated and a clerk was lynched, a lot of writers, the writers began it, then a lot of people, other people joined in, cultural practitioners, scientists in a first, scientists joining hands with writers. This is what I mean about large numbers. So they returned their state awards and as a gesture of protest. And the amazing thing was that this was an entirely spontaneous move that simply sort of, took on a life of its own, to the extent that you had school children, a schoolgirl in Karnataka saying, I'm going to return the award I got for best essay in the class or school or something. But, a gesture of protest to say, see, this is something I have earned. This is a badge of honor. And I'm going to return it because you have not honored my fellow citizen. So at that point, I was talking about multiplicity, but also languages. For many of us writers, we actually, I'm not ashamed to say that we discovered a hell of a lot of writers because we had no access to their languages. So we not read their work. Some of them we had not even, we not even heard of each other. But because we were suddenly writing letters and petitions together, and we were talking about what do you do with the awards? A young woman would ring me up from Calcutta and say, what do I do with the statuette? So there were all these discussions. Some of them would refer to God, not even God will forgive you. Some were unashamedly commie, so you had languages both in the sense of a multilingual India, but also languages in sense of how you relate, how you give vent to protest, and how do you express yourself politically. So I think this is very important to mention because language is linked with a particular culture of its own, and we have not only languages, but we have registers within the languages, since caste affects everything in this country. So, we have to remember that too, that multiplicity within the language, not just the standardized language. The next point I want to make is to recall and reframe what we as individuals, as groups, collectives, as citizens are trying to do here. We are trying to negotiate two great big overlapping maps, one cultural, one political. But mostly it's hard to see which is which because they're so entangled. And of course, our current masters know that, which is why culture is the battlefield of choice. This means literal as well as artistic mapping. So we saw that Bombay, Mumbai is used, if you like, as a kind of microcosm of the Indian world. But it's not just of the place. It's just not just of places, but people, homes turned into not homes, homes you can remap only in your dreams. So the project is also to make the almost invisible visible, to count people. So the cinema project does this wonderfully. I remember when I saw the exhibit in Delhi, what really fascinated me was, the people who are on the margins, the outliers, and these are important words because during the COVID times, we saw that suddenly people are talking about migrants. Well, where were they? Is it that we didn't see them before and they're referred to as migrants as if they're doomed to be perpetually homeless? But the cinema project, there was one story Madhu told us, which I have never forgotten, about a man who used the shirt. No, he was going to use old film in various ways.
Cut celluloid strips into collar stiffener.
Into color. So, to me, this was a kind of testimony to, which is why I want to reiterate over and over, to the point of boring all of you, that the creative endeavor, that forms of political expression are really not limited to us. So that is what I mean about including. And we have seen that in the other moment that I'm going to keep coming back to, which is 2019. Before COVID, made us lose that moment. Before that moment dissipated, And I don't believe it's dissipated entirely. It's there. It's there as a legacy we can draw on. There was a kind of feeling that all kinds of people were coming together, all kinds of, it was a kind of pushing the frontiers of what might be poetry, what might be music. People were learning to sing in each other's languages. They were translating entirely on their own, not only recovering poetry, say, such as fairs, but were actually inventing art forms for the street. So, which was what shall I say, a source of inspiration, but also a huge learning for the more formal cultural practitioners, such as some of us. So I do want to say that the cinema project locates people in terms of livelihood, which is terribly important. So culture is a political site, but a site where both collisions and collusions take place. So it looks to the future, but to do that, it makes use of the past for the present. So we've spoken about archiving the contemporary, the recent past, the past, and the remote past. Now, why do we go to the remote past? Because we live in times where the remote past is used to blur the lines between mythology and history, where there is the fabricated past for the political aims of the present. So we cannot ignore any part of time. So record, speculation, debate, doubt, open-endedness. There's that wonderful film in the Majlis archive on people on Dal Lake in Kashmir. And you somehow feel, oh, it can't end there because I want to hear more narratives. It's an open-endedness because Kashmir has changed from the early 90s to now in the last 3 years since 370%. It's changing. So more narratives to be added, whether from the people on Dal Lake or the lives and testimonies of the migrant workers. And sometimes a visible absence is the most powerful signpost of all. Madhu has shown us the Kashmir page. Now that signpost says, look more for the truth which is hidden, which is not allowed to be revealed. So this is a call to look for a fuller story, more voices and nuances, more unofficial stories in times where, we have the craziest official stories making the rounds. So what holds it all together? Resources in the public domain that map the rights of people, that explore and express solidarity in as many forms as can be invented and imagined, that says, look, these are the people who have been left out. These are the places that have faded from our maps. Listen, this is what's wrong. But take heart. Why are dictators and fascists and authoritarians scared of us and our words, our films, music, painting, videos, installations? Why are they afraid of stories with many stories within, of satire, of play? Because we can still speak up through the arts. We can make use of new technologies, reason, and the imagination to speak to each other about resistance. We can do it with drama and beauty and terror and playful joy. We can still speak to each other about making a better world, which was the motto of the World Social Forum. And how do we do it? How do we build on what the Majlis archive has to offer us with our political word and image and sound? Nilima Sheikh, the wonderful artist we all admire and who was associated with Majlis, I think, says in a conversation with Kumkum Sangari, she says, use other voices to say what I can't, which is a rather wonderful way of referring to collaboration. And since I'm a writer and, we experience the least of collaboration, I particularly want to admire this and privilege this. So I think I should sum up by saying, you know, I feel the need to come up with almost a kind of crude list of suggestions, the way forward, because that is how we honor not only the Majlis Culture Centre's efforts, but also those moments of actions, attempted actions, failed actions, which we must pick up the thread of and adapt for our times. So first, I think, update the manifestations of flare-ups. And when I say flare-ups, you know, in the Indian context, you have the chronic, such as the caste system. It's been there forever. You might have new manifestations, but you have those flare-ups. And we've reached a point where the chronic and the flare-up are entangled. So we seem to be in a continuous and horrible moment, a long moment of a flare-up. So how do we update these, the revelations, the examinations of these flare-ups, and update the actions accordingly? How do we mine the legacy of failed actions? Because they're really important. You know, a more polite way, a more euphemistic way of saying that is X opened the door, or we stood on X's shoulders to achieve this. What are we doing? We're really mining incomplete projects, failed actions, and it's best to say, this is where it failed. Let's go, you know, forward. And to keep pushing the boundaries of how to probe and challenge structures of power through as many forms and hybrid forms as we can imagine. I want to suggest that we add our own material and spread the web to a network of common resources, as well as safe spaces in which to attempt more ways of making art and living cultures. And I say this especially because I have been involved with the Indian Writers Forum, which has been running a site called the Indian Cultural Forum, also a culture journal, but the Indian Cultural Forum looks at cultural politics more directly. And like Majlis is under the Creative Commons license, and what we really want is to encourage everybody to use it as a platform, everybody except those who think that the rishis knew the Concorde and you know, they knew how to do plastic surgery and so on. So we would prefer the rational and the imaginative. So finally, what we want to do is enlarge knowledge in the public domain. We have to think of knowledge as our common property. And I think that's really what we are aiming towards. Over to you, Madhu, Sneha, Vani.
Thank you. Thank you, Githa, for that really thoughtful way of actually just approaching not just this archive, but looking at, you know, even the ways in which we try to develop new works. And, you know, looking back to see when something else is created, the whys and the wherefores. You've given us a lot of thoughts, which were, as you said, they seemed initially like separate things, but the ways in which you linked them were, I think, really very, very rich. And I think it's going to be stuff that one will have to think about a little bit more as we go on. At this point, I want to make one announcement before calling Sneha in. I think there was a problem with our setting on the chat box, so you probably weren't able to write so far. And but please write in your questions, and if you're waiting to speak to speakers directly, that's wonderful too. And Sneha, without any more delay, let me please ask you to come in. Thank you for being so patient. But it's been a rich, engrossing evening, and I'm sure I could see you nodding, you know, furiously too. So I'm really, really happy to have you today. I think you have you know, you have insights and experiences to share from an archivist point of view. And I think, and that to somebody who's archiving art, you know, in an age when art is one of those things that's broadly understood to be extremely closely linked to the market and to marketability. What does it mean to actually create an accessible bank or archive of art, and what is the questions that it raises? for you, for you all as the Asia Art Archive, where you are the senior researcher and project lead in India, based here in Delhi. Sneha also, with her colleagues, works on projects to digitize artist archives, create online bibliographies, edits publications, and organizes workshops and seminars on art history and writing in the region. I think Sneha will share with us even how the definitions of the region or of Asia or of art itself are something that they are constantly revisiting. It's something we look forward to hearing more of, Sneha, from you. Sneha holds an MA in art history from the Faculty of Fine Arts in MS University, Baroda, and a PhD in cultural studies for her work on 20th century architectural history from FLU in Hyderabad. So welcome, Sneha, over to you, and we wait to hear you.
Thank you so much, Vani, and also to Madhusree for this invitation. It's an incredible occasion and a huge cause for celebration. And I'm very honored to be part of this discussion, though to no small extent feeling a bit overwhelmed. So I'm not sure what I'll be able to contribute to this discussion that hasn't already been said about Majlis so eloquently by Madhusree, by Githa, also by Vani and Sudhir, who we heard. But I'll just try and maybe share some thoughts. And if there are things that that I've left out, maybe we can pick them up in the discussion. I mean, I think it's safe to say that for those of us working in the domain of arts and culture in India, especially, the word Majlis is immediately sort of recognizable and almost synonymous with the Majlis Culture Centre. And what's interesting is how in the contemporary sort of art scene internationally, Majlis as a term has recently gained some circulation in the context of the ongoing Documenta 15 in Kassel. And Rangrupa, who are an artist collective from Indonesia, and Documenta 15's artistic directors, use the term and the concept of Majlis as part of their curatorial as well as decision-making process, as an important sort of tool, for the artists and collectives sort of network to exchange ideas and projects and so on. And in both occasions, the Majlis Culture Centre, as well as sort of Rangrupa's use of the Majlis, it's interesting what the naming itself seems to propel in terms of the forms of actions, the forms of processes that emerge. One of the things that we like to do at the organization where I work, Asia Art Archive, is when we're dealing with archives, we believe that it's not simply a responsibility to sort of collect material, organize them and put them out there, but really to also give it context, to frame it, and to frame it, with questions that are sort of from the present. So I think, so even while thinking about sort of what I could say about the archive of Majlis, I mean, some of the contexts that strike me are, one, for instance, the 1990s. This has already sort of come up. I mean, we know that the 1990s, have been sort of an incredible turning point in Indian political history, culture, society, but it's a somewhat elusive decade as far as archives go. And these archives would be sort of incredibly important, in order to enable us to sort of concretely map those shifts that occurred in those in that decade. I mean, in the field of art and culture, I think we do see shifts sort of more concretely taking shape in the 2000s, whether one is talking about artistic practice, technologies, media environments, and so on. And the 90s maybe was perhaps more than anything else a sort of a decade of transition in all of these domains, especially also in terms of the forms, and in this context, cultural sort of forms of cultural practice that were emerging in the 90s. But where are those archives? How do we access those, sort of histories of those moments, of that moment? And so for me, first and foremost, I think what the archive of the Majlis Culture Centre does is really to throw open that decade of the 90s and beyond for us, and provide a lens, of a wide range of cultural activity of the time, and with its location, of course, in Mumbai. So in a sense, it provides us a window into Mumbai, or at least a part of Mumbai at the time. but is also a moment of it also captures a moment of Bombay reaching out to many worlds as well. So there is that. It's there's obviously also Majlis's sort of feminist mandate, and the deep significance attached to experimental and I think innovative cultural forms that emerged at the time. And there were sort of experimentations happening across the board in film, in plays, in curatorial practice, for instance. In art, a lot of public art happening at the time, in music, literature, and so much more. I mean, the history of Majlis, obviously, I mean, as the archive sort of makes evident, can be, of course, traced through, the projects, the productions, the fellowships, the archival sort of projects as well, but also perhaps, and true to its name, in the numerous sort of conversations that were generated through Majlis between organizers, between participants, interlocutors, and of course, publics. I imagine that in that moment when, of action, of improvisation, and given how many people participated in Majlis's activities, how many people were witness to Majlis's activities, I think it is beyond sort of certainty for me that the histories associated with Majlis will also be dispersed and can be found across various archives, perhaps. And perhaps the making online of the Majlis archives will also hopefully kickstart more conversations, more research into sort of figuring out what those connections are, as I think Githa also sort of signposted. I mean, and one thing that you can already see on the Majlis archive site is that several parts of the archives are housed with other, archives. So like Padma, for instance, or, it's written that they're housed with other local institutional archives, right? And we can see that some projects like Cinema City are hyperlinked to external websites. So what we're seeing is that, there's already a constellation that is being signposted, right? So, and this, it makes me think not only about sort of the multiple sort of, where does an archive of Majlis sit? I mean, does it sit in an, I mean, is it an art sort of archive? Does it sit in political archives? Where does it sit? It sits in so many sort of places, but that also will find bits and pieces of Majlis's history in a lot of other personal and institutional archives. And just to give you an example, and again, I'm going to bring up Nilima Sheikh. I mean, at AA, I first encountered some connections to Majlis when I was working on putting together the personal archive of Nilima. And I found brochures and photographs of Sundari and actor prepares, which Majlis produced. I found also some correspondence between Nilima and Madhusree, translations, shared readings, possibly, if I remember correctly, on Akka Mahadevi and some more. So, and in my research sort of interviews with Nilima, she spoke extensively about how, in particular, the festival, the sort of expression that was held, that was organized in 1990, was such a watershed moment for her in terms of thinking about feminist practice. In particular, she spoke about sort of the richness of the symposium with its speakers that Madhusree had gathered from different parts of India, and the nature of conversations that were generated and the forms of speech that were made possible, I think. And so these connections, I think, that sort of that lead out of I think the Majlis archive also, I think, becomes a useful way of thinking about the Majlis archive itself as gatherings and dispersals. So and the other thing that perhaps that I'd like to maybe flag is that oftentimes, especially with institutional archives, whether we're talking of the big archives, the state archives, or even of other institutional sort of entities, there's always this sense that because there is a long gap between when the events took place and when their archives actually became accessible, that distance of time, of history, etc., that they tend to make the archive benign. So I guess the question becomes, what role can it play in the present? And again, this is something that has already been discussed today. I mean, it's been 6 years or so since the Majlis Culture Centre closed down. So as much as the launch of the Majlis Centre's archive may be about sort of remembering and recollecting those moments, and it is important also to recollect, to remember these moments, these practices that emerged from those moments. Perhaps what drives the urgency to put this archive out there is more about sort of opening up Majlis in our present moment. And this intent, I think, is quite clearly articulated in the archive itself, where I presume Madhusree has written, and I quote, "Archiving, when imagined as an action to counter hegemonic sources of knowledge production and control of access, is a political intervention, as well as an art prospect. The everyday material and the lived-in experiences are collated, annotated, and rendered as evidences for histories to be speculated." So I think, in other words, it entails thinking about how, despite the fact that the Majlis Culture Centre is no more around, how its archive can intervene meaningfully in our political present. And I think Githa has already listed out some of those possibilities, the forms of those possibilities, right? So it's about sort of thinking how maybe now we have an invitation to intervene into the archive itself. And maybe not just the archive, but also, look deeper into the history of Majlis itself. Coming from sort of, from the present sort of context where we know that there have been sort of newer ways for us to sort of complicate the national frame, newer sort of community and political formations that have emerged in India over the last sort of decade or so, and so on. So so while Majlis as an organization did a lot, the archive can maybe do something that both the institution has been sort of unable to do, and can maybe do something differently from the institution. And for me, I think that is the future of the archive that I look forward to, look forward to participating and look forward to seeing as well. I think I'll stop here.
Thank you, Sneha. That was so exciting to just hear you make these other connections, from the between the personal archive and the political archive, and where those journeys sort of can take us, and what does an archive invite us to do. I think that, and I like the idea of actually thinking about, is it then a benign thing if there is a safe distance? Is it more risky to only try and archive as things are happening? But I think that these are important questions, and some things don't become safe just because they're further back in the past, and those are good reminders. I think between you and Githa, there have been some very exciting readings on this, which personally I know I have to also would love to revisit and think about some more. But I think this is also a good point at which I want to open this up. Are there friends who are attending, who would like to ask questions or comment or intervene? Or do any of you, Madhu, Githa, and Sneha, do you want to respond to any thoughts from each other? Both are welcome.
Vani is in a way a comment or question to all of us, including myself, is that in this journey from analogous to digital, first of all, like every elderly people, we resisted digital as long as possible, because we were in love with the materiality, with the tactility, with everything. And now suddenly slowly, we also realized the potential of the digital, and how the politics of digital, aesthetics of digital, everything is slightly different. It's not that you made celluloid film and then one day you took a video camera and you make a digital film. It's not that. You'll have to learn digitality differently. So what is happening? So that is one thing. We learn to make or write or produce digitally. But here the material is analogous and we are storing them digitally. And often these two aesthetics or two materiality clash. Not that I have an answer, not even have a proper question, but I'm sure we all are going through it, especially when we talk about archive, because archive is about some existing material, right? It is not producing. And is it as simple as just scanning them? I mean, or is there more things to it, you know?
Does anyone in the audience want to respond? It would also be great to have your inputs. Just give us a hands up and we will give you permission to speak, as it's called. Yeah. While anyone decide, while people make that decision, Githa, do you want to respond to any of that? Sneha, do you want to, because you've been working across materials from, across time, trying to see what does it mean? I think it'd be nice to hear from you.
So, I mean, I think it's not a question that has an answer. I think because I mean, this is something that we get sort of. I mean, as we work with physical archives and we digitize them, and because Asia Archive is primarily a digital sort of platform, so in the process itself, we feel a certain, let's say, a loss in one sense, as something is sort of going under the scanner in a sense. And so there is, of course, but I also think that I mean, it's not to say that the digital sort of makes up for the physical, but that I think every encounter with an archive is an experience of loss in some sense or the other. So in one sense, because we're talking about sort of things from the past, archives that always wish to be complete, but there are things that slip away, and there's a sense of loss there of something will never. I mean, it's archives can never, in that sense, be complete. So so there is that sense of loss there as well, and also when we think about physical archives, it's very different when we encounter the archive physically as well. It's not as simple as going into somebody's home and taking out an album and accessing it. When you visit institutional archives, the experience is once again mediated, right? You never encounter the archive. You only encounter the catalog, and then there's a process. So I think, we've come to terms with the various stages of loss, in a sense, associated with archiving.
May I add a point here?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Of course, I don't know anything about literally about what you're talking about, but as I listen to you speak, it occurs to me that a good analogy might be the business of translation. And this is, of course, something we encounter closely and agonize about in a country like India. So there's much talk about fidelity. So, is it faithful to the original? So I just want to point out that Borges, who liked to mess with our minds but challenge us, said that it's a question of the translation being, it's a question of the original being unfaithful to the translation. So if you carry that over into what you're talking about, I suspect you might feel a little better.
Hi, this is Maitri Mukhopadhyay. I'm a long-term friend of Madhusree's. Yeah, it's what you. I just wanted to address what you all have been just discussing. First of all, let me just say I'm so fascinated. I'm totally awestruck by this, and so I have very few words to actually describe the feeling that I have at present. But it's not. It's about. Okay, is turning the physical into the digital archives a kind of a sense of loss? Yes, for the artists, maybe. Yes, for Madhusree, must have been, kind of. But as she said, we all, kind of picked up with it. I somehow think that what she's done here and what many of us are doing, turning things digital, is actually where we have to organize the material. We have to select. We have to give it a new form. And by doing all of that, I think we have a new cultural project altogether. So it's more than a recovery. It's another conversation that we start in a in a form and manner that is different from the original, but is nevertheless another cultural product put into the space, of which we are very happy, by the way. So that's what I wanted to say. So let's not just look at it as loss. I think this is a new cultural project that is taking shape and has taken shape and has brought into the public domain another new idea and work of art. Okay.
May I quickly sort of just respond also? Like, is that?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Yeah, no, I mean, one, thank you, Githa, for, I think the analogy of translation is really quite perfect. But also because I think, just to clarify, I was not talking about loss in terms of a lament. So when I say that we sort of work with loss, I'm not sort of lamenting that something is lost. It's just that more conceptually, there's no sort of accessing or thinking about archives without that sense of loss, to the extent that the question of loss becomes a bit redundant, is I guess what I was hoping to say. Yeah.
Amrita.
Hi, I'm so pleased to see the archive. Thank you very much for this project and for opening it up and launching it today. Congratulations and all the best. I thought the would be a good example if we could see how you did Nilima Sheikh's Actor Prepares paintings on the archive, because they were a backdrop on the play, and I remember them, they were massive and really awe-inspiring and beautiful, but I think I will see them better now on the archive, because we saw them from the theater and it was always very far and we could never see them close up. So is there a way that you can show it to us now? And I think we can see this translation. I think it's a wonderful idea that it's a translation and it's a new conversation. I think that's a brilliant idea as well. And we can see that happen if we see some of these things on the archive. But I look forward to exploring the archive if you can't show it now. Thanks.
I'm just adding, this is Amrita Shodhan, historian, who was very closely, who was one of the architects of that annual course that we used to run for undergraduate students, where we got the most eminent practitioners of art and bring them to the undergraduate students and say, talk to them. And if there is no communication, and of course students will come and say, oh, their art we don't understand. Kumar Shani, oh, by God, oh, we cannot watch it for more than 5 minutes. And we almost put them together in one room and locked it and said, have a conversation. And it was wonderful. And Amrita actually planned the history and the science workshops. Anyway, you have another audience.
Ayan, we'd love to hear from you. Ayan, you have permission to, you just have to unmute yourself and then you can speak.
I'm sorry, I've been a very casual observer of the whole. I didn't intend to participate in, but knowing Madhu and knowing you and knowing Githa very vaguely, I thought I would love to listen into what was happening. And I just congratulate you on what you're doing. Marvelous amount of work. I'd love to contribute more to this archive myself. And I've been through this whole business of going digital myself, so I know about how it's a different form altogether. It's like going from film to video, you know, from one medium to another. I've just been listening to you guys, Matt. I haven't been really thinking any thoughts.
No, but it's nice. It's nice to hear from you. Haven't heard your voice also for very long. So this is good.
Yeah, I'm in a post-COVID phase, right? I'm going through long COVID just now. So I'm a little knocked out as well.
Well, I
But
hope
it's
this one
so,
gave you.
yeah.
Yeah.
Let me just say
Uh,
hi to all of you and congratulations.
Thank you, Ayan.
Madhu, ages since I saw you. It's ages.
Vivan is waiting also to say something.
What I want to say is that in my context as a visual artist, I shifted towards looking at photography, and I looked at photography literally from my grandfather, and realized that the portraits that he took of his family were more than just family albums. As you know, family albums became important right from the 19th century and were produced in wonderful forms. And then from that, I realized that there was more to what Umrao Singh Shergill was doing than just photographing his wife, which he fell in love with, a Hungarian, and then his two daughters. And many years later, I thought that I should do an exhibition of these, but I was nervous to show them in India because they would say, well, you've got a famous aunt and you've got some photographs, and this all be very sentimental. So I was lucky to be invited by the other half of Amrita Shergill, her Hungarian background, and was invited to do an exhibition in a public gallery in Budapest. And the director, Katalin Kesharu, a well-known art historian, was very encouraging. And I had just entered, in a way, what is the beginnings of installation art. I had done a very public installation art of a dead man killed in the streets in Bombay called Memorial. But here I felt that I could even shift, and much of my work moves from the personal to the political and is constantly changing. And the exhibition was well received there in Budapest, and I realized that I can also come back here and show it. So again, I had a very sympathetic director of the Hungarian Cultural Centre, and I put this work up. So in fact, I was surprised that I called it the Shergill Archive. I mean, I was looking at things and, you read little bits, archive fever and all that. And I sort of just said, I'm going to call this the Shergill Archive. And the archive then became a word, and then more than a word, that it could express things about a family album, and then even propose narratives from the analog, from the photographs that Umrao Singh took. So if I put a strip, both born in different years, Amrita Shergill on one strip and Umrao Singh in the other, and then they have a common point in Paris where they are also so in fact the Paris flat became the sort of studio for both of them to perform, and there was a performative element. So in fact, this proposed a kind of narrative, and I remember reading Peter Wallen. Peter Wallen, isn't his name? Yeah, and he said that he disagrees with Roland Barthes that there can be narratives in photography. So I took that up and, in fact, felt that I could propose narratives just by putting one still after another and have a whole spectrum. Then many years later, into almost the beginning of the 20th, so 1994, and in the beginning of 2000, the digital was around. I wasn't very experienced in this, but again, I felt that the same material could be then used by what I call the digital wand to then look into the family. And already I was part of a movement of narrative painting. So I could further, in a more complex ways, narrativize the relationships. So as I wrote in my catalog, you can tell a lie to propose a new truth, that there are relationships between father and daughter, and sisters and the different parents, particularly daughter and father, in their cultural difference. And this Shergill archive, sorry, this retake of Amrita. Now the word retake, as everybody knows, Madhusree, that it's a term which is used for the shot. When taking a film, you retake the shot. And so it already proposed a cinematic reference. So then the whole still photograph actually proposed a series of cinematic stills, in a manner of speaking. And here, if I can further be personal, that Kumar Shani, my dear friend, wanted to make a feature film on Amrita Shergill, and I worked very closely with him. He couldn't do it, but I sneaked in and with these still photographs proposed a kind of film aspect to it. And so the digital then allowed that freedom to play with the characters and to propose, in fact, provocative relationships. And I think that opened a whole new window for me, and then proposed other things. Now I'll stop here.
Thank you, Vivan, for sharing that that personal journey also of how archives also tell their own stories and how you yourself traversed it. It's inspiring, and I'm glad and I'm grateful to Sneha for bringing in that link between the personal and the institutional, which is something that we don't always end up seeing, especially when we're creating an institutional archive. So thanks very much, Vivan. Is there anything else that people want to share? Anyone wants? Githa, Sneha, Madhu, would you want to say something closing, or can I close? Can I close now?
May I add just one line?
Yes, please.
I think we've had a range of sort of, interesting points. They might all seem separate, but I think one way of bringing it together is, of course, what actually brings so many of us from different disciplines to the same forum, which is the business of making alliances. And again, I'm using this word advisedly because we say interdisciplinary. What you really mean is making alliances, but that is also the larger need of this present moment, which is to make alliances among movements, among constituencies, and different cultural communities, and not just the creators of culture, but also to include as many as we can from those who partake of culture and practice culture without self-consciousness. I just wanted to add that.
Okay, I can't think of a better note on which to actually close this wonderful evening. Thank you, Lalita and Chair, for your comment, for your notes in the chat box. It's what gives us the energy to go on. I personally want to actually just say that this is a very, very special evening for us at reFrame as well. We're a very, very new setup. We're trying to parallelly, as our fellows create, we're trying to create an ongoing kind of archive in a very, very loose sense of the word. But it's actually really enriching for us to think about how much, archiving things that have happened. I don't want to make it simply about the past and the present. Archiving things that have happened, thoughts that have been turned into certain actions, those things. It's wonderful to be reminded how they do still have the power to generate new conversation, to destabilize certain ideas of power, to challenge sort of what was and what is that relationship between hegemony and challenging, things around us, and to sort of revitalize it. I like, the thing that both Githa and Sneha, I think, picked up, Madhu, from the sharing was actually so much of what this can generate, that this is a different cultural project, as Maitreyi put it. I think these are very rich ideas, and I can see more of this coming in the chat box as well, that the idea of what this then triggers of its own, being the new field that we enter, with your creation of the Majlis Archive. rich and diverse, and I'm sure painful as the process was, to create. But so thank you for doing that, and thank you for letting us be the platform through which it's shared out with the world. Very proud, very happy, and wishing us all a lot of engagement with material and efforts like this. I think to see where we go, and what networks we create and what alliances we build. Madhu, I want you to just formally close on your end. You have to unmute, Madhu.
As a filmmaker is always a filmmaker. So through all my avatars, I remain a filmmaker. So I'll end on a film. It's a 4-minute small video. My filmmaker friend from Germany sent just 1 hour before this panel discussion to start, saying, hey, I also want to be part of it. So nice of our programmer that within 5 minutes of receiving it, he has actually put it up. So I want to end on that. It's a 4 minutes video. You may just walk out of this theater that you used to do it during the end credit. So this is end credit moment, okay?
Dear Majlis, this is my first letter to an entity who is neither a person nor a place or an institution, no artificial intelligence, a physical being though, not just a concept. In 1995, I came to Bombay. We squeezed ourselves together in a 1-room apartment on Kardanda Road, watched Indian films on television and ate chicken tikka from a takeaway stall called Hungry Eyes. We were young filmmakers and we were stunned how similar we were. In 1998, I read Hakim Bey's Temporary Autonomous Zone. It was the beginning age of what was later called globalization. My collective in Berlin, Dog Film, sent out an invitation to friends around the world, containing one question: hungry minds think alike? While the so-called leaders of tomorrow gathered in Davos, we gathered in Berlin, from Bombay, from elsewhere. Would we be able to form a network of locally acting cells of cultural producers? Experimental, non-hierarchical, poetic intervention as an act of political resistance. The hardware, a temporary bar, a screen, a library, a computer. In 2001, one of the hungry minds from Bombay asked me during a longer stay what I was missing most. I thought about dark bread, a walk in the snow, but no. Not much, I said politely. Maybe just a place like that. A temporary bar, a screen, a library, a computer. Go to Majlis, she said. That's how we met. You probably won't remember, as I was one of so many from close and from far. I took a rickshaw, how many times, from west to east, under the railway, got stuck in monsoon, watched the high-rises on the other side grow higher and higher, the settlements appear and disappear. Stop by the mosque, please. On the first day, I guess in lack of an idea what to do with some more lost foreigners, we ended up in the library, watching VHS tapes, video art from Pakistan, you remember? Later I moved on and in. Long, long meetings in the office, more and more familiar faces with each time I returned. Your Majlis became not just a home, but a hub. I remember a vivid film screening and discussion. And then being the last one to leave, just one moment alone with you in silence, then heading straight to the airport. In 2016, I came back after a long pause. You were no longer there. It felt like the light had changed. Depression hung over the city like a dark cloud. Silence, long shadows, Bombay Noir. Dear Majlis, I've heard that you are back. You have changed your shape, but that's okay. We always wanted ourselves to be temporary, right? We wanted to avoid institutionalization and culmination of power. In that, we completely underestimated the emotional attachment, the social structure, the impact of collectivity. In your present form, I can take you to my house for the first time. Be welcome and feel at home, Majlis.